And we have the Bring Them Home campaign happening on the front lawn of Parliament today. This is calling for the release of Jewish hostages held by Hamas. It's in Canberra. The pro-Israel supporters were on the front lawns. This is a day after the pro-Palestine rally that called for a ceasefire.
How many more children need to die? How many more civilians need to suffer?
So that was the Greens leader Adam Bandt, and he joins me now. You were at this protest yesterday. Have you gone out the front of Parliament today to visit the group calling for the release of these Jewish hostages?
We've been really clear that the taking of the hostages amounts to a war crime. We condemned it. The hostages do need to be released. We've made that call. There should be a release of the hostages. What is also clearer, though, by the day, as the unfolding horror of the consequences of the invasion takes place, is that there needs to be a ceasefire. And that the calls for the ceasefire, had been calling to oppose the invasion some time ago. Over the course of the weekend, French President Emmanuel Macron has obviously shifted that country's position, and they're now joining the international calls for a ceasefire. Most of the countries in the world are calling for a ceasefire. That needs to occur.
Okay, and I want to delve into that more in a moment, but where politicians go matters. It means things to people, you know, where you physically lend your support. So will you go out today to visit the people who want these hostages released, to meet them and say, you know, face to face, yep, I agree with you?
Oh, well, look, my message to them is clear, that the hostages should be released, and they should know that, and they should know that they've got our support in that. I think at the moment, the calls for a ceasefire, though, that also need to be heard, and part of our job is to bring those calls, including into Parliament. We have seen other countries shift their position, and it's time for Australia to do the same.
But people might say, okay, you're visiting one and not the other. Why is that?
I've been in contact with a lot of people since October the 7th. Members of the Jewish community, members of the Palestinian community, plus people who are campaigning for peace, maintaining strong local contacts there. We've got a strong Jewish group within the Greens as well, who, like many in the Jewish community, are doing it tough at the moment. We are pushing for peace, and we're going to continue to push for peace.
Okay. And on the ceasefire element, Hamas has said the October 7 attack, it wants to do that again and again. That's what its leadership has said. If there is a ceasefire, it would be rearming, trying to repurpose for that. Can you understand from Israel's point of view why they wouldn't want to allow that to happen?
We've seen over 11,000 people die, over 4,000 children, and we're witnessing the horrific scenes now of hospitals unable to function, and the toll is being taken on civilians. We have condemned the civilian deaths and mourned the civilian deaths of the 1,200 Israelis who died. Likewise, with over 11,000 Palestinians, 4,000 children dying, that has to be the critical issue that people focus on. It's why the United Nations on the ground, it's why the doctors who are and the healthcare workers who are in those hospitals are saying we are past breaking point, we can no longer function. That has to be the world's primary concern.
But that can be a concern at the same time. You have to recognise, if you're in Israel's position, what the consequences could be. If it's Hamas aiming to rearm and repurpose for another October 7 attack, they're not going to want that to happen, are they?
Well, we've got to push for peace, and a just and lasting peace. And that
with Hamas?
That will come for Palestinians and Israelis should have the right to self-determine their own future and to live equally in peace and security.
Is it fair to say, though, that Israel and Hamas would never come to peace? Because Hamas, it's in its convent to destroy Israel and Jewish people. They're not. It's not a partner to have a peace deal with, is it?
Well, my focus is on Palestinians, not Hamas.
But they're in charge right now in Gaza. So you can't sort of cut them out.
Parts of Gaza, in West Bank, obviously they're not. The question is, what can the world community do to ensure that both Israelis and Palestinians have the right to live equally with a just peace and security? Now, that's got to start by not only ending the invasion and having a ceasefire and ending the invasion, but it's also got to involve ending the occupation. And in terms of the future, as you're saying, well, what does the future hold? What would a future peace look like? It's got to be based on the end of ending the occupation, and then allowing Palestinians and Israelis to then self-determine their own future in accordance with international law so that they can enjoy equally the same rights that we get to here in Australia, for example.
And that possibility, though, could never happen if Hamas is in charge in Gaza, could it?
What the world community has not done is support the Palestinians and Israelis in pushed for an end to the occupation.
Well, it has before.
And allow them to self-determine
actually
their
got really
own future.
close. So 2007-8, there was a peace deal on the table that Palestinian Authority seemed close to. Israel then was offering to cede authority of the old city, Jerusalem, and then the Palestinian Authority walked away from it.
There's been a number of times throughout history where there's been discussions about peace and there's been progress, and sometimes they've been closer than others. But what is crystal clear now is that there is an occupation of the Palestinian territories, right? And part of the reason that we spoke so strongly against the invasion of Gaza is that they are blockaded in. 2.2 million people blockaded into an area half the size of Canberra. They haven't been able to get in and out, and for many years now, and there's nowhere for them to go. Though that doesn't create the conditions for a just and lasting peace, Tom. Like that doesn't. And so the end of these
But nor does
invasion,
Hamas being in charge, does it?
Well, this is why we have to have a just and lasting peace that is premised on the end of the occupation and the end of the invasion, so that Palestinians and Israelis can make these choices.
Did want to ask you quickly about rental affordability. Is there a short-term issue we need to address? Because I know what you want on affordable housing, but that takes time. Migration is happening right now at a really rapid pace that's making this issue worse. Do we need a temporary reduction from what is just a demand-driven system?
Well, the short-term issue that we need to address is to have a freeze on rents. Like, people need breathing space, and they need breathing space to allow incomes to catch up with soaring rents. We're seeing today.
But that won't create more houses. I mean, we could have an actual shortfall.
It will give people some breathing space. Because
at
the moment, people can't. I mean, forget buying a home for many young people at the moment. Even renting near where you work, where your family is, where you study, is becoming out of reach. And we're seeing that data today. This is Labor's rental crisis. Labor could take those short-term steps that you're talking about to give people.
What about on migration?
Space. Well,
are you comfortable with where it's at? Staying demand-driven.
The most important thing that we can do is freeze rents now,
but that's not
for 2 years, and then cap them after that. That gives people the breathing space.
But it doesn't increase
supply. In terms of what do you do, in terms of how do you do? Well, let's have a look at supply. In my area of Melbourne, the big public housing tower blocks there that we've got that house many, many people were all built in the 1960s, and governments have not kept pace. If we want to have more houses available soon for people, especially if we've got a rising population, build more public housing.
I'm really close out of time, but do you have a view on migration? Are you comfortable with the settings?
The main thing that I would like to see is a freeze and cap on rents that would deliver immediate relief to people.
No view on the migration element?
That's what would deliver the most tangible, immediate relief to people.
No view on the migration?
Well, the question is, what is going to make a difference to people right now, and what will make a difference to people who are in crisis right now is a freeze and cap on rents.
Greens Leader Adam Bandt, appreciate your time.
Thanks.